Now, you've seen car makers jack up their hatchbacks and call it cross, active and whatnot. But who would have thought? Take an MPV and make an SUV out of it. Well, Honda did. They used the Mobilio to create the BRV. But there's a lot more to it than what its Mobilio route suggests. We have spoken about this design on multiple occasions, but in a nutshell, that CRV-inspired face gives the BRV a lot of presence. While the stylish taillights and the quirky design for the 16-inch alloy wheels help it stand out from the crowd. Its strong character lines and body cladding add to the presence. Even on the inside, it trades the dashboard design of the Mobilio for the updated one from the Amaze facelift. That sounds like a good idea until you see the price tag, and then you realize that the jazz of the city's elements would have justified that asking price. The dashboard is sleek like that of a sedan, and that takes the BRV further away from its SUV aspirations. The cabin looks smart, but it is more functional than good looking. Its Mobilio routes also give it plenty of space, both for the occupants and for cargo, and that 7-seater configuration is the BRV's USP. The third row has a decent amount of knee room, proper seat belts and bottle holders. However, the seats are placed a bit low, which means that long-distance journeys for adults will be uncomfortable because of how high up their knees will be. The fact of the matter is, the BRV still doesn't come across as a proper SUV and tilts more towards the quirky people carriers that are sold in the Japanese domestic market. Fortunately for it though, none of its compatriots will create trouble for the BRV in this space. But it has a bigger threat that comes from Korea. It was a late entrant into the crossover space, but was an instant hit thanks to its SUV stance and styling. You might be surprised to know that the BRV is taller than the Creta and has a better ground clearance too, but despite that, the Creta looks more imposing. Its European design theme makes it quite sober for a Hyundai, but that seems to have worked very well with the audience. After looking at how boring the Grand i10 looks already, I'm not sure how the sobered down fluidic design theme will age with the Creta. The Creta is quite plush and well spec'd on the inside too. The tall dash adds to the SUV character. There is a touchscreen infotainment system and a rear parking camera. The BRV doesn't even get parking sensors. Where the BRV pips the Creta though is with the seating comfort. All the seats are not only more accommodating but also more comfortable even for 3 grown-ups in the second row. The Creta doesn't match the BRV's boot space either, and the high loading lip means that it isn't as convenient. And speaking of convenience, let's now talk about the underlying theme for this comparison, their automatic transmissions. If you want the convenience of an automatic transmission with the BRV, your only option right now is a 1.5-litre iVTEC petrol motor. The gearbox in question is a CVT or a continuously variable transmission, much similar to what you get in the Honda City. Now, because of its seamless operation, it's quite smooth, so unlike an AMT or a torque converter, there's no hint of any transmission shock. It is so linear, in fact, that when you step on the gas, you won't realize how quickly you're picking up speed until you look at the speedometer. Past 4,500 RPM though, the rubber band effect of the CVT is evident. This gearbox also comes with the S or the second mode, which lets the engine hold higher revs to give you better torque for scaling inclines like flyovers or uphill climbs. The CVT also comes with paddle shifters that let you shift between 7 ratios and primarily come in handy for engine braking or to build quick momentum for overtakes. One area where the BRV suffers is the cabin noise insulation. Now, we love that iVTEC motor. Most of us even love the way it sounds when the revs rise, but not so much with the CVT, especially when it gets into that rubber band effect. Also, the road and the wind noise starts creeping in a little early in this car. I would compare the noise levels of this cabin to the noise levels in the cabin of the Amaze, though they should have been on par with the cabin of the Honda City. The 1.5-litre engine from the Honda City is a gem though, producing 119 PS of power and 145 Newton meters of torque. Under the wet conditions that you see here, it hit the ton in an impressive 11.2 seconds. It was also very relaxed at highway speeds, translating into a fuel economy of a rather high 21.6 kilometers per litre, but in the urban runs, it could barely manage 11.8 kilometers per litre. Creta's 1.6-litre engine has better specs on paper, but despite that, it couldn't trump the BRV on outright acceleration. The fuel economy figures weren't too impressive either, managing a disappointing 8.8 km to a litre in the city and 13.75 km to a litre on the highway. Where the engine redeems itself though is with refinement, which ironically is smoother than the Honda. The torque converter transmission is quite impressive too. The gear shifts in the Creta are noticeably smoother, and it's also quicker to respond to path throttle or full throttle compared to the BRV. One little bummer though is you need to get your hand off the steering wheel to tip the selector into the manual override. So it can be time consuming if you are to initiate a quick engine braking maneuver. Ride quality on both the BRV and the Creta is almost on par, but the Creta has a bit of an advantage here. Both absorb all the ruts and potholes quite well, although the BRV suspension seems to be a bit louder. The BRV also felt a little bouncier than the Creta over undulations on the highway, but that should settle down when the car is fully loaded. While neither of them have a sportily set up suspension, they do handle quite well with minimal body roll. However, the Honda does have the better steering, which feels sufficiently weighted and offers better feedback. The Creta steering, on the other hand, is a lot easier to use in the city, but doesn't feel as nice at higher speeds. The Creta's brakes are a bit spongy in comparison to the BRV. Fortunately, Hyundai India is taking safety quite seriously, so you get ABS, driver and passenger side airbags as standard across the Creta range. However, because the automatics are only available in a trim below the range topper, you lose out on the stability programs and the 6 airbags. Now that's quite a bummer considering the automatics in the Creta have a huge demand, so at least the ESP should have been standard. What you do get though is hill start assist, and because this trim comes with satellite navigation, you also have this nifty little addition where the voice guidance will give you a heads up about the oncoming curves or turns. And that's a nice thing to have. Both these cars are impressive in the city, and that is what they are truly intended for. They both have their own virtues. While one can ferry 7 around town in comfort while feeling more car-like to drive, the other offers a typical SUV feel from behind the wheel with a hint of premiumness in a compact package. If you are more into long-distance touring though, you might want to look at their diesel counterparts instead, but for urban runabouts, you will not go wrong with either of these. The demand for 7-seater vehicles has been rapidly growing, but despite that, Chevrolet recently announced that they are shelving all plans of bringing in the Spin MPV. I also hear that Hyundai have cancelled their plan of developing the Grand i10-based MPV further. And I also hear that Honda seems dissatisfied with the response that they've got so far for the Mobilio. Now I believe the reason for this is that MPV form factor. People are shying away from those typical breadbox designs and looking for something that looks more SUV. And that is where the BRV rightfully fits in, a more stylish alternative to your typical people carriers. But if you're in the market looking for something more SUV, then that is where the Creta takes the cake, both in terms of styling and the commanding driving stance. It also has a kit brimming with features and of course that feel-good factor, and probably that is what justifies its extra 1 lakh premium that it charges over the BRV.